This video is all about reading request data that we send up to our web APIs. At the end of this lesson, you will be able to read data from query strings, the request body, and a route's parameters. So what is this all about? Well, most web APIs require data from clients. For example, browsers and Postman, for us to be able to interact with them in the way that we intend to interact with them. There are three different ways to send data to an existing endpoint. One is through the request body. These are objects that are found on the body of the request. So remember the rec part of the homie? So you have rec and res, they're two homies. Well, the rec part is the request body. These are always stored on the request body object. The next one is the key value pairs that are found inside of what's called a query string. So on the URL's parameters, we can look at the parameters and we can have what's called a query string. And that query string will be representative of key value pairs that we can pull information off of, reference later, and use within our application. And the other way is through dynamic routing or route parameters. Let's talk about the first one, route parameters. So this is used to send up some bits of information about the resource we're requesting. This can be in the form of like an ID. So for example, if we have a single user, we could send up that user's ID on the URL. And then what if we wanted that to work for all of the different users in our application? Well, we could simply send up dynamically a different ID per user. So we would have to set up our route parameters as a way to dynamically configure our endpoints in order to send up different IDs for different users. So you do this on the back end. You put this together on your server. And we're going to see what that looks like in just a minute. But an example of this would be in like a delete endpoint, for example. Here we have server.delete hobbits at :ID. The ID will be dynamically set to whatever comes after hobbits. So if you send up Frodo as a string after hobbits, ID will be a key value pair of Frodo is the string ID. Or ID is the string Frodo, I should say, the other way around. But I'm sure you're starting to get the picture here. But let's look at a code example. So in this route parameter, we have a delete function that is setting up a dynamic ID. That dynamic ID is found at the /:ID on the URL that we're passing to this delete function. The second line, the important line here to note, is that rec.params.id right there, const ID equals rec.params.id. So in this case, if I were to send the request to hobbits /12, what would our ID become? Right there on the line below that says URL is set to /hobbits $$ open curly brace ID close $ or close curly brace. So what is that ID referring to on those lines right there on the URL and operation params? Well, you're probably thinking to yourself, if you kind of caught it, it's going to be 12. So in that case, the URL is going to be requested at hobbits at 12. And then the operation requested will be delete for a hobbit of ID with 12, right? So it's dynamic. We could send up anything on the URL at localhost 5000 /hobbits at 15 or 32 or Frodo or Bilbo or whatever. And the 12 would be replaced with whatever it is that we send up there. So it's like having a free variable to store information right there in your URL that you're sending up. Take a look at some of the URLs that you are browsing to today and try and look for IDs, identifications, or some sort of route parameter that could potentially be used to identify who you are. The next way to send information up to an API is on the query string. So HTTP protocol, remember, is stateless by design. That's part of the REST architecture. But HTTP, the standard protocol, is stateless by design. So we will send information directly on our URLs that we're requesting. So these query strings are actually structured as key value pairs on the URL string that we send to the server. Each pair takes the form of question mark, key on the left-hand assignment equals value on the right-hand assignment. And then pairs are separated by ampersands. Okay, so you could actually have multiple key value pairs on a query string, which is really, really cool. So for example, if I were to send up my www.myapi.com/user with the question mark name equals Luis, then the key would be name and the value would be Luis, or we would get this key value pair, this object on the rec.query that is set to Luis. Okay, name is set to Luis. So let's look at this in code. It's always the first place we want to go. So we get this. This is a bit more code, so you're going to kind of have to like just hold on for a minute because there's some sort of logical stuff here that's probably not super obvious to you. But notice the second line down. We're setting a variable short field and assigning that the value of whatever is found at rec.query.sortBy. Okay, so if we wanted to use this, how would we have to use it? Well, we would need a question mark and then sort by and set that equal to some value. Okay, and then we're using that sort field with this database of hobbits. Little did you know that an array in JavaScript could be a very nice database for prototyping. But we have this array of hobbits, and we're going to sort those hobbits based on ascending or descending, so like a 1 or a 0. And then we could use our little application, our little sorting algorithm down at the bottom, which you don't need to understand all of the logical bits of that sorting algorithm, but we could see that we could use that sort field to say, hey, whatever is the greater, sort it by that. And then it'll be sorted by that ID. So really nice. Okay. So this is what's important here. We can read this data by looking at the rec.query property. So the query property on the rec object is an object itself. Okay, and it will have a key value pair of sort by, and we can use that. Okay, so really, really nice way to implement. And then of course, we can fulfill our logic down below because we have that set equal to or assigned to the variable in memory of sort field. Now we're going to take a look at the request body object. So request body are objects that clients can send with relevant information for the API requesting. This is very pertinent for the HTTP methods of post and put. Okay, so any post and put requests usually have some body of information on them. Whenever you create info like username and password, you send that info on the body of the request. And remember, we're JSON stringifying our bodies. We are using the JSON package from Express to make sure that all of the bodies that are coming in and out of our server are JSON stringified. Okay. So whenever we create any information, we use the body. Whenever we update information, we send those updates usually on a body. That's kind of just how the world works. And it's one of the more commonly used ways that you are going to be interacting with servers as you build your client-side applications to send information to your servers. So let's take our awesome little Hobbits database here. And let's see what happens when we want to create a user in that database. So the next ID here would be 3. So the next time that this server is called, we would increment that, right? But take a look at our server.post. Okay, so we're posting to /hobbits. Then we have our request and res. So our rec and res are homies inside of our route handler. And we have this object that we're pulling off of the rec.body and setting equal to our hobbit. So every single one of our hobbits will need to have what properties on them in order to match the way that the shape of our database looks. So look at each hobbit object in our hobbits database there. We have an ID, we have name, and an age. So we need to at least send the name and the age properties set to hobbit names and their age. And then, of course, our algorithm is going to take care of the ID. And so it's going to assign that ID and then increment it write in turn as well. And then we're going to push the Hobbit in, and we're going to get new Hobbits sent to our database. So now that you've seen how this is all going to work, let's do some of this together. There's a tutorial found in Training Kit that you're going to need to copy and paste some things over, but I'll go rather slowly so that you can take time to catch up, pause the video, and follow along as necessary. But go ahead and jump into Training Kit for this section, or scroll down from this video. Open up your server that we have been playing with, the Hello World Express server, and we're going to kind of refactor, delete some things, and change it so that we can kind of see how things work dynamically. Okay, since we have made a few little kind of minor tweaks in the past to our server, go ahead and kill off your server by running Control-C, and then run yarn start once more to get that server up and running on port 5000. And to make sure that we're running properly, go ahead and open up Postman and send up that awesome, sweet GET request to Hobbits and see what happens. Okay, we're up and running. We're over at Hobbiton. So this should be exactly where we left off from the previous time that we met together. We're going to go into our Training Kit and notice that we're just below the video that you're watching right now. And you can scroll down here and you can find the server.delete code that is found in our little overview. So we're going to revisit our delete endpoint. We're going to change it all together. So go ahead and look at our delete, and let's copy and paste that. Notice that we did something a little bit interesting here. We changed our delete request so that we have this unique ID as our identifier. Okay. Now we're not going to actually delete projects, and there's a little typo there, so operation. We're not going to actually delete our Hobbits. We're actually just going to send back the ID dynamically so you can see how that works. So this is an example, of course, of using the rec parameters, the request params, or the request parameters in a dynamic way. So ID is going to become whatever we want. And this could be virtually anything. This could be foobar, whatever you want it to be. For us, it's going to be the ID because that's what we're using off of the rec.params.id. Okay. Now I want you to also throw in a console.log rec.params so you can see all of this come to fruition. Okay. Let's head back over to our terminals and let's stop them and restart them. And let's go back over to Postman, and we're going to hit a delete request in Postman. And we're going to send up the ID of Frodo. Go ahead and send that, and notice what we get back. The URL that was requested was Hobbits at Frodo, and then the operation performed was delete for Hobbit with ID of Frodo. So let's go back to our console. Notice that we got something in our console. That is the rec.params object. Let me show you what I mean by that. We just logged this out right here on line 22. Okay, let me just give us some real estate here. And notice what we're getting in the console on the left. Very important to understand that you can run node processes right here, and you can see your console logs inside of your console that is running your server. Okay, so that's great. rec.params.id, very commonly used for looking up single users. So if you wanted to get a Hobbit by their ID, or if you wanted to delete a single Hobbit and you run that delete functionality through there, bada bang, bada boom, that's how you do it. This is dynamic. It can be whatever you want it to be. To prove that it's dynamic, we're going to send up another request. And let's say this time we want to delete Bilbo. And notice that Bilbo was our ID. Look what changed. The rec.params object went from Frodo to Bilbo. And if you wanted me to prove it one step further, I could do 1, ID of 1, ID of 1, and then our ID is 1. So that is how the rec.params works. Request parameters. Cool. You should all be masters of that by now. We played around with it quite a bit. And if not, you're going to have plenty of time to play around with it in your afternoon assignments and through your guided demo. Okay, let's head back over to Training Kit because we have some more code to explore. And that's part of this little let's do this assignment together is let's just walk through these things together. There's no reason why we can't learn and kind of copy and paste some code at the same time. So grab this and make sure you're also reading up on this stuff too, because there's a lot of good stuff in there. But grab this code from the query string example. Head back over to our function here. And we're going to set this up on the global server.get hobbits. So instead of all that, go ahead and copy and paste. Okay. So now there's some interesting instructions here. We're going to send this sort by and name up to our server. Okay, so we're going to grab this information. But first, what we want to do is we actually want to log out rec.query. And then remember, what is the one thing you always want to do after saving changes to your server? That's right. Go and kill it off and refresh it. Okay. So now we're going to send a GET request to Hobbits. So head over to Postman. Change this over to sort by name. And this is going to sort things alphabetically. Let's see what happens. It's got to be a GET. Check it out. We actually sorted them non-alphabetically. Oh no, Frodo and Samwise. Okay, I thought that was going to be Frodo and Bilbo. Okay, cool. If we added another Hobbit to the mix, let's do so by just copying and pasting a Hobbit. Give this a different ID. We have Samwise, Bilbo, and Frodo in our database. Let's sort by the name. Oh, what's the one thing we've got to do after we make changes and save it to our server? Restart it. Let's go back over to Postman. Send the request. And there we have it. Bilbo, Frodo, Samwise, all alphabetical. ID is being completely ignored. It's just sorting by alphabet. Now, if we're kind of in this weird 1, 3, 2 thing, one thing we can do is we can sort by and just say ID and see what happens. 1, 2, and 3 instead of 1, 3, and 2. And check out our logs in our server. Look at what our sort by, our query object looks like. The query string is sort by and then the value. So sort by name, sort by ID. Could be sort by age as well. Let's try it. There is no age property. Never mind. We could try that later. But if you look at this, you can give your qualifiers, you can give your identifiers to your query string. And you can identify and sort your objects based on those qualifiers. So this would be really handy in a few situations. I want you to think about in your mind, when would sorting actually become handy? Well, sometimes you're given a list of tabular data and you want to sort by that column. This is exactly how you would do it. You'd send it up on the request query string. Okay, so that's what we're logging out, the request.query, and that's what we get in the console over here. So now the last one is actually probably the most difficult one to achieve, but we're going to do it together. We are going to head over to TrainingKit, and we're going to grab all of this code, and our post request is going to change drastically. Let's go back to our code and let's delete our post request. And notice what we did here. We created our little database of hobbits. We have a little dynamic ID that we're going to update each line, but we're going to use this to create hobbits. We're going to add some hobbits in here to our little database. And then the hobbits that we get back are going to have the new hobbit that we send up. So we're going to show you how to do this with Postman. And then you're going to try and do it yourself by implementing a put request. Okay? So in Postman, we're going to head over here. We're going to change our method to post. We're going to post to hobbits and no more query string, no more route params. Notice there's nothing here that indicates that we need route params, and we're not trying to do anything with the query string. We're just going to read from the request body. Okay. So we need to send up the pertinent fields because we have ID, name, and age, but we just need to make sure we send up name and age. And here's how you're going to make that happen. Remember how when we switch from get to post, so I'm going to do that again, get, see how this body is grayed out? To post, now it's available. Go ahead and click on that body. And you're going to select raw, and instead of text, you're going to select JSON. This is where you get to write your JSON strings, JSON format. So we have name of Samwise Gamgee, age of 36. This is proper JSON. Notice that if I put like a string or a little comma here, we're going to get this X that says bad string. It's going to tell you when you have the wrong type of input. All strings must be double quotes, unexpected single quotes, okay? So all strings must be double quoted. That's just JSON format right there. Okay, so now let's see what happens. Notice that our original object, our array of objects, just has Bilbo and Frodo. We're going to send up Samwise on the request body. And we also want to console.log rec.body. Okay, we're going to save that. And every time we save our server, what do? We go and restart it. Now we're going to go back to Postman. We're going to send this information across the World Wide Web. And let's see what our response was back from the server. Oh, look at our awesome village of hobbits. Bilbo, Frodo, Samwise. Cool. We're doing it. We're building software. This is our little database. We just added an object that wasn't there before. Pretty neat, right? So you're going to be using this knowledge to continue to build out your understanding of this ideal, this concept that you can communicate with your web servers and you can send up relevant information in 3 different ways. And that relevant information can be sent up using query strings, route parameters, or request bodies. Now, think about a put request really quick. Put request is mapped to which letter in the CRUD acronym? The answer is U. It stands for update. So if we had a record, maybe Bilbo completed a year of age, was going to 112, we need to update that. What would we have to do? That's just one example of things that you could do, but how would we make that work? What would we need to do to make sure that we had that put together? Well, there's a really cool follow-along exercise that I actually want you to do on your own in TrainingKit. So head over to TrainingKit and walk through this follow-along exercise and get your server set up so that you can build together a put request. And then there's also a really cool challenge for you to work with as you grow and develop your understanding of these CRUD operations. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hit that exercise hard. I think you're really going to enjoy it. And then, of course, we're going to go all back through this in further understanding, gaining further depth of these principles as you work